struggling for inclusion. That was understandable 50 years ago. That was understandable 100 years ago because we didn't have the income or education we have today. It's no longer acceptable. Why are you struggling for inclusion when you have the ability to create your own reality? Racism is about staying in charge. That's it. Racism is about keeping white people in the driver's seat, period. Nothing to do with hatred. I think as African people, we make our problems much harder than they are. And don't get me wrong, we have a hell of a fight in front of us. A hell of a fight. But we make it so much harder on ourselves and so much easier on the white power structure because we don't come together, organize our disposable income, and build the institutions our people need in order to survive. We won't do it. We'll go to the school and argue. We'll go to the school and do this. Why go through all that when all you have to do is sacrifice a certain amount of money for a year and we can build a school? Why go through all that when you can sacrifice a certain amount of money and we can put this many black boys to work, this many young black women to work? We can build our own bank. We can build our own hospital. We can build our own supermarket. Why go through the medical racism? Why go through the economic racism? Why, when you can solve a lot of these problems on your own? But the Achilles heel is black people are not interested in using their money to finance their liberation. That is why we suffer. This is why we rather have tug of war with the white man for 50 years instead of building your own. I'll give you an example. Take the Montgomery bus boycott of 1955. The good Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. 381 days, not a single black person rode the bus. Once the Supreme Court overturned the illegality of separate but equal in public transportation, black people started riding the bus. What if Dr. King would have told those black folks who didn't ride the bus for 381 days, once the law is overturned, we're not getting back on the bus. All that money we saved for 381 days of boycotting, we're going to buy a black bus and start a black bus company. That's the solution. But because we're so psychologically dependent on white people, we keep on falling into this matrix of struggling for inclusion. Struggling for inclusion. That was understandable 50 years ago. That was understandable 100 years ago because we didn't have the income or education we have today. It's no longer acceptable. Why are you struggling for inclusion when you have the ability to create your own reality? It's unacceptable. Look at what the Chinese are doing in European society. Look at what the Arabs are doing in European society. Look at what the East Indians and the European Jews are doing in European society. Would it be harder for us to do it? Absolutely, because we are public enemy number one, but we are not even trying. We are not even trying. So yes, racism has a lot to do with this, but we are racism's number one accomplice. We co-sign it with our passivity. White supremacy is a group system created, implemented, and maintained by all white people. There are no white people who exist outside of the system of white supremacy because it requires participation and support from every member of the race. It is a system of exploitation, domination, and monopolization. The purpose of racism is to eliminate the threat of black excellence. Racism doesn't exist because white people are supreme. Racism exists because white people are insecure. A people who believe they are supreme do not have to handicap inferiors. If I believe my basketball team is better than yours, I don't need to sabotage your basketballs.
Dis-le.
If I believe your boxer is not better than my boxer in the boxing ring, I don't need to sabotage his drink before he gets into the ring. So the mere fact that white people sabotage black people is proof that they don't necessarily feel superior, that they may actually feel inferior. Racism can be explained in 3 rules. Number one, all white people are racist. This is the most important rule, and it is the hardest to teach black people because we have been hypnotized by religion to see everybody as humane. Are not humane. I would even make the argument that Arabs and Asians are not very either. So, rule number one, all white people are racist. Racism is not bigotry, so I need to explain. Bigotry is outright hatred for another people. I don't believe every white person is a bigot, but I know every white person is a racist. Racism doesn't speak to hatred of Africans. Racism speaks to a need to control the resources of the black community, the privileges in the black community, and the opportunities in the black community to maintain white privilege. That's all racism is. That's all it is. It has nothing to do with your emotional belief about another people. Racism is about staying in charge. That's it. Racism is about keeping white people in the driver's seat. Period. Nothing to do with hatred. You can be racist and you can be a bigot. You can be, if you're a bigot, you're automatically racist, but you can be racist without being a bigot. So rule number one, they all racist. Rule number two, they don't share power. There is no power sharing between black and white. If you think there is, show it to me. It doesn't exist. Which is why I often caution black people about going into business with white people. Because most of the multiracial businesses I know of, they're all owned by white people now. Because white people don't share power. We know that. Colonization showed us that. Slavery showed us that. Gentrification shows us that. Politics show us that. Economics show us that. White people believe in domination. They do not believe in sharing. They do not believe in cooperation. They believe in domination. Rule number three, white people are ruthless. Black people also have trouble understanding this tenet of racism because we are so humane. We are such humanitarians that we can't believe that another person could poison your water, poison your food. A lot of black people can't even begin to conceptualize the fact that may have been man-made. AIDS may have been man-made. Half the cancers we catch may have been man-made. We can't conceptualize the possibility that they were killing black people during just to get the money from the government. We can't even conceptualize it. White people are ruthless. And by ruthless, there is no behavior so cruel and unforgivable that they would not consider it. White people will do anything to maintain power. Those are the essential 3 rules of white supremacy. Our children need to understand it. And one of the big reasons why our children need to understand it, and we as adults, if you don't understand racism, you will end up with a low self-esteem because you will internalize the things white people do to you and you will attribute them to there's being something wrong with you. If a child don't know white people racist, he will take the insults personally. He will think he's the N-word. He will think he's inferior. But when he understands these people suffer from a pathology that is beyond repair, rooted in their experience under the Ice Age when they experienced their trauma. We got to teach racism to black children. They have to understand white supremacy in order to survive it physically and intellectually. Because a lot of black people are having their self-esteem destroyed by the attacks and treatment of white people because they don't understand this person is under a spell. They are under a demonic intragenerational trauma that comes from the relationship they had with Mother Nature before they encountered African people.